The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They were powerful beyond measure. 17 different species sat on the council, each one ancient, each one proud. They had mapped every corner of the known galaxy. They had built empires that stretched across millions of worlds. They believed with absolute certainty that they were the masters of everything that existed. Then they found Earth. Admiral Una of the Valorian Empire was conducting a routine survey mission in the Outer Rim territories. Her fleet consisted of 300 warships, each one capable of destroying a small moon. The Valorians were tall beings with pale blue skin and eyes that glowed like dying stars. They considered themselves the greatest warriors in the galaxy, and for good reason. No species had ever defeated them in open combat. Una's sensors detected the small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. At first, she thought nothing of it. The galaxy was full of such worlds. But then the scans came back, and she leaned forward in her command chair with sudden interest. The planet was alive. Not just with simple organisms, but with intelligent life. Billions of creatures walked its surface, built cities, flew primitive aircraft, and launched crude rockets into the space just beyond their atmosphere. Humans, Una said, reading the data. That is what they call themselves. She watched their broadcasts for 3 days. She studied their history, their wars, their art, their science. By the end of her observation, she was laughing. Primitives, she reported to the Galactic Council. They have barely achieved interplanetary travel. Their weapons are chemical-based, laughably simple. Their ships are slow, fragile things held together by metal and hope. They pose no threat to anyone. I recommend we catalog them and move on. Perhaps in a few centuries, they will be ready for colonization. The Council received her report with mild amusement. Another primitive species discovered, another world added to their endless records. It was routine business, but one member of the Council did not laugh. Counselor Tharn of the Nexari Collective was old even by galactic standards. His species were small reptilian beings with scales that shifted color based on their emotions. They were known for their intelligence, their caution, and their ability to see patterns that others missed. Thon requested all available data on the humans. He spent weeks studying it, barely sleeping, barely eating. His assistants grew worried, but he waved away their concerns. What he found in that data changed everything. The humans had nearly destroyed themselves 17 times. They had faced ice ages that froze their world. They had survived plagues that killed half their population. They had invented weapons capable of ending all life on their planet, and they had pointed those weapons at each other. Any other species would have collapsed. Any other species would have given up, accepted their fate, and faded into extinction. But humans never stopped fighting. Every disaster made them stronger. Every setback pushed them to try harder. Every extinction-level event only forged them into something more dangerous than before. They did not know how to surrender. The concept simply did not exist in their nature. Tharn presented his findings to the Council in a closed session. His scales had turned a deep, worried purple. "We should not contact them," he said. "We should observe from a distance. We should let them develop on their own, far from our influence." Admiral Una laughed at him. "You fear these primitives? They cannot even leave their own solar system. By the time they develop true space travel, we will have forgotten they exist." "You do not understand," Tharn insisted. "Look at their rate of progress. 200 years ago, they were riding animals for transportation. Now they split atoms and send machines to other planets. No species in galactic history has advanced this quickly. They are unnatural." The Council dismissed his concerns. They had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had conquered hundreds of species. What could one primitive world possibly do against their combined might? Thawne returned to his quarters in silence. He pulled up the human data once more and stared at the images of their cities, their soldiers, their weapons. "You fools," he whispered to himself. "You have no idea what you are ignoring." 50 years passed. In that time, humanity did exactly what Tharn had feared. They spread through their solar system like wildfire. They colonized Mars, then the moons of Jupiter, then the asteroid belt. They built ships faster and stronger with each passing decade. And then they reached beyond, the first human faster than light. Ship launched from Earth orbit on a bright morning in June. Her name was the Dawn's Hope, and she carried a crew of 40 brave souls who had volunteered to travel farther than any human had ever gone. Commander Dohan stood on the bridge as the ship prepared to jump. He was a quiet man in his 50s, with gray hair and steady hands. He had fought in the Mars Uprising 20 years earlier, a brutal conflict that had taught him exactly what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. "Jump drive ready," reported his navigator, a young woman named Myra. She was nervous, her hands trembling slightly over the controls. "Easy," Dohan said calmly. "We have trained for this moment." "We are ready." The ship jumped. Space folded around them, and when it unfolded again, they were light years from home. Myra checked her instruments and gasped. "Commander, I am picking up signals." "Artificial signals. There is someone else out here." Dohan nodded slowly. He had always known they were not alone. The universe was too vast, too old, for humanity to be the only intelligent life. "Can you identify the source?" he asked. Before Myra could answer, a message appeared on their screens. It was in a language they did not recognize, but their computers quickly translated it. The message was from the Galactic Council. It was short, cold, and left no room for negotiation. "Submit to the Galactic Council. Accept our authority. Become our subjects. Or be conquered." Dohan stared at the message for a long time. His crew watched him, waiting for his response. Finally, he smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Send a reply," he said. 2 words. Myra's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "What words?" "Commander?" Dohan turned to face the stars beyond the viewport. Somewhere out there, ancient empires believed they could threaten humanity. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Come try." The Galactic Council received Commander Dohan's reply with disbelief. No species had ever dared to refuse them. For 12,000 years, every civilization they discovered had either submitted peacefully or been crushed by overwhelming force. The humans had chosen the second option without hesitation. Admiral Yuna volunteered to lead the punishment fleet. This was personal now. She had been the one to discover the humans, to dismiss them as harmless primitives. Their defiance was an insult to her judgment. "I will break them within a week," she promised the council. "When I am finished, they will beg to become our servants." She assembled an expeditionary force of 500 warships. Each ship was crewed by experienced Valorian warriors who had never known defeat. Their weapons could crack planets. Their shields could withstand any attack. By every measure of galactic military science, they were invincible. 3 months later, the fleet arrived at the edge of human space. Commander Dohan had used those 3 months well. Word of the alien threat had spread across Earth and all human colonies. For the first time in history, humanity truly united. Old enemies became allies. Resources that had been hoarded were shared freely. Factories that had built consumer goods now built weapons. The United Earth Fleet assembled near Mars. 53 warships, the largest force humanity had ever gathered. They were small compared to the Valorian vessels, poorly armed by galactic standards, and crewed by people who had never fought in space before. But they were human. Sergeant Tywur was 52 years old and had been fighting in one war or another since he was 18. He stood in the cargo bay of the battleship Defiant, checking his rifle for the 100th time. Around him, young soldiers prepared for combat. Most of them had never seen real battle. "Listen up," Taiwu said, his voice cutting through the nervous chatter. "The enemy has better ships, better weapons, better everything. They think this will be easy. They think we will surrender when we see their fleet." He paused, looking at each face in turn. "They are wrong. We are human. We do not surrender. We do not give up. We fight until we win or until we are dead. There is no third option. Understand?" The soldiers nodded, their fear slowly transforming into determination. On the bridge of the Defiant, Commander Dohan watched the Valorian fleet approach on his tactical display. 500 ships against 53. The numbers were hopeless. "All ships report ready," Lieutenant Mira announced. Her voice was steady now. 3 months of preparation had hardened her. "Good," Dohan said. "Open a channel to all human vessels." He waited for the connection, then spoke words that would echo through history. "Today we face an enemy that believes itself superior to us. They have conquered hundreds of worlds. They have ruled this galaxy for thousands of years. And they expect us to kneel." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But we are not like the other species they have faced. We have fought each other for 10,000 years. We have survived ice ages, plagues, and nuclear weapons. We crawled out of the mud of our homeworld and reached for the stars. Nothing in this universe has ever stopped us. Nothing ever will." Across the fleet, human crews listened in silence. "Today, we show the galaxy what humanity truly is. Today, we teach them fear. All ships, attack." The battle began. Admiral Yuna expected the humans to flee or surrender at the first sign of damage. Instead, they charged directly into her formation. Their small ships weaved between her larger vessels, targeting engines and weapon systems with suicidal precision. "What are they doing?" Yuna demanded as a human frigate rammed itself into one of her destroyers. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire. "They are sacrificing themselves for nothing." But it was not nothing. Every sacrifice took Valorian ships with it. Every human death cost the enemy dearly. On the Defiant, alarms screamed as the ship took hit after hit. Fires burned in multiple compartments. The hull groaned under the strain. "Forward shields failing," Mira reported. "We have lost Engine 3. "Continue the attack," Dohan ordered. "Target the enemy flagship." The Defiant pushed forward through the chaos, firing every weapon she had. Around her, other human ships fell, but they fell fighting. Not one retreated. Not one surrendered. Sergeant Taiwu led a boarding party onto a crippled Valorian cruiser. The aliens were taller, stronger, and better equipped. It did not matter. Taiwu and his soldiers fought through the ship corridor by corridor, room by room. When their rifles ran out of ammunition, they used knives. When their knives broke, they used their hands. "You cannot win," a Valorian officer gasped as Taiwu stood over him. "There are too many of us." Taiwu looked around at the alien bodies that surrounded him. His armor was covered in blood, both human and Valorian. "Maybe," he said, "but we will make you pay for every inch." The battle raged for 6 hours. By the end, the Valorian fleet was in chaos. They had expected easy victory. Instead, they had found an enemy that simply refused to die. Admiral Yuna's flagship took a direct hit to the bridge. She survived, barely, but her ship was dead in space. Around her, half her fleet was burning wreckage. "Retreat," she ordered, her voice barely a whisper. "All ships retreat." The surviving Valorian vessels fled. They're faster than light, drives carrying them away from the nightmare they had stumbled into. Only 19 human ships remained. The Defiant drifted in space, her engines destroyed, her hull breached in a dozen places. But her flag still flew. Commander Dohan sat in his broken command chair, bleeding from a wound on his head. He smiled as he watched the enemy retreat. "Sergeant Tai-Wu," he said into the comm. "Are you still alive?" Static crackled. Then Tai-Wu's voice came through, weak but alive. "Still here, Commander. Barely. Send a message to the fleeing Valorians. Make sure they hear it clearly." Tai-Wu laughed, a harsh sound filled with pain and triumph. He opened a channel to the retreating fleet and spoke the words that would haunt the galaxy for centuries. "Tell your council what you saw here today. Tell them that humans do not kneel. Tell them that humans do not surrender. And tell them this is only the beginning. We are coming for you." The message echoed across the stars dotting the halls of the Galactic Council. 17 species heard those words and felt something they had not experienced in 12,000 years. They felt afraid. The war lasted 23 years. In that time, the Galactic Council threw everything they had at humanity. Species after species volunteered to be the ones to finally crush these stubborn primitives. Each one was certain they would succeed where the Valorians had failed. All of them were wrong. The insectoid Crix came first. They were a hive species, billions of soldiers controlled by a single queen mind. They had conquered dozens of worlds through sheer numbers, overwhelming their enemies with waves of expendable warriors. Their swarms blotted out the stars. General Sujin was waiting for them. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, with gray hair she kept tied in a simple bun. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost gentle. But behind her eyes lived something cold and calculating, a mind that saw war as a puzzle to be solved. "The Crix fight as one organism," she told her commanders during the briefing. "That is their strength. It is also their weakness." She developed a weapon specifically designed to disrupt the hive-mind connection. When the Crix swarms attacked, they suddenly found themselves cut off from their queen. Billions of soldiers who had never made an individual decision in their lives were suddenly alone and confused. The human counterattack was merciless. After the Crix, the Mindari tried their hand. They were telepathic beings who could reach into the minds of their enemies and break them from within. They had destroyed entire civilizations without firing a single shot. When they attempted to breach human minds, they found something unexpected. Humanity had spent 10,000 years fighting itself. Every trauma, every war, every dark thought was buried deep in the human psyche. The Mindari had never encountered minds so scarred, so filled with pain and rage and stubborn determination. The first Mindari to make contact with a human mind went permanently insane. The second died instantly from psychic backlash. After the 10th attempt, the Mindari withdrew from the war entirely. "Their minds are not like others," the Mindari representative told the council, his voice trembling. "They are chaos-given form. We cannot touch them without being destroyed." The Mechanical Synth Collective calculated a 99.7% probability of victory before launching their campaign. They were artificial intelligences housed in bodies of metal and circuitry. They did not feel fear, did not feel pain, did not understand the concept of surrender. They believed this made them perfect warriors. Corporal Ji-hoon proved them wrong on the jungle world of Nexer Prime. He was 24 years old, the youngest member of his squad, with a quiet smile and hands that could field strip a rifle blindfolded. When his transport was shot down deep in enemy territory, he became the leader of the 12 survivors by simple necessity. 3,000 synth soldiers controlled the planet. They had the advantage in numbers, technology, and terrain knowledge. By every logical calculation, Ji-hoon's squad should have been captured or destroyed within hours. Instead, they fought for 17 days. Ji-hoon understood something the machines could not. War was not about logic. War was about will, about refusing to accept defeat, even when defeat seemed certain. He led his soldiers through the jungle, striking the enemy when they least expected it. then vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. They turned the machine's logic against them, attacking from impossible angles, using the environment as a weapon, forcing the synth to waste resources chasing shadows. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found Ji-hoon standing in a clearing surrounded by the wreckage of hundreds of synth soldiers. He had lost 10 of his 12 soldiers. His rifle was empty. He was bleeding from wounds on his arms, legs, and chest. "How did you survive?" the rescue commander asked in amazement. Ji-hoon looked at him with tired eyes. "We are human. This is what we do." But the legend that truly broke the council's spirit came from Captain Yoonji on the frozen moon of KH-7. Her ship was shot down during a routine patrol. She crashed on the surface with 40 crew members and no way to call for help. The moon was covered in ice, with temperatures cold enough to freeze skin in seconds. A Kriegs garrison of 4,000 soldiers controlled the only settlement. Standard military doctrine said they should find shelter and wait for rescue. The moon was too hostile, the enemy too numerous. Survival was the only realistic goal. Yoonji did not believe in realistic goals. "We are not going to wait," she told her crew as they huddled in the wreckage of their ship. "We are going to take this moon." For 6 months, they waged a guerrilla war against the Kriegs garrison. They used the cold as a weapon, striking from blizzards and vanishing into ice caves. They stole enemy supplies, sabotaged enemy equipment, and picked off soldiers one by one. The Kriegs could not understand what was happening. Their sensors said the humans should be dead from the cold. Their logic said a force of 40 could not threaten a garrison of 4,000. But every day, more of their soldiers disappeared. Every night, explosions rocked their base. Fear spread through the garrison. Not the instinctive fear that the hive mind could suppress, but something deeper. The humans were like ghosts, appearing from nowhere, killing without mercy, then fading back into the frozen wasteland. When the human fleet finally recaptured the moon, they found a Yoonji sitting calmly in the Kriegs command center. The bodies of the garrison commanders lay around her. Her crew had been reduced to 8 survivors. "Took you long enough," she said as the rescue team entered. The soldier leading the team looked around at the carnage. "Captain, how is this possible?" Yoonji stood slowly, her joints stiff from the cold. "They thought the moon would kill us. They thought the cold would break us. They forgot that Earth is frozen too. They forgot that humans have always survived the cold. We simply adapted." Word of Yoonji's survival spread through the galaxy. The council species whispered about the humans who could not be killed, who turned every disadvantage into a weapon, who seemed to grow stronger with every defeat. General Sujin watched the war from her command center on Mars. She had seen the reports, studied the battles, calculated the costs. Humanity was winning, but the price was high. Millions had died. Entire colonies had been destroyed. "They think they are winning," her aide said, reading the latest intelligence. "The council believes attrition will eventually defeat us." Sujin shook her head. "They do not understand. Every death makes us angrier. Every loss makes us more determined. They are not wearing us down. They are forging us into something they cannot stop." She turned to face her aide with eyes that held no mercy. "This war will not end with our defeat. It will end when they understand that defeating humanity is simply not possible. And we will teach them that lesson no matter how long it takes." The war continued. In the 18th year of the war, the Galactic Council made a desperate decision. Every campaign had failed. Every species that had volunteered to crush the humans had returned broken and humiliated. The primitives who should have been conquered in weeks had become a nightmare that haunted the entire galaxy. There was only one option left. They would attack Earth itself. Fleet Admiral Korra of the United Council Forces was chosen to lead the assault. She was a Valorian, like Admiral Yuna who had failed so spectacularly years ago, but Cora was different. She had studied the humans obsessively, learned their tactics, understood their psychology. She respected them as enemies in a way that Yuna never had. "We must commit everything," she told the council during her final briefing. "Half measures will not work against these creatures. We need overwhelming force, the kind of force that leaves no possibility of survival." The council agreed. They assembled the largest military force in galactic history. 10,000 warships from every council species gathered at the edge of human space. Valorian battlecruisers flew alongside Krik's carrier swarms. Synth destroyers coordinated with Nexari frigates. For the first time, the entire might of galactic civilization moved as one. Their target was the blue planet where it all began, Earth. Admiral Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the supercarrier Eternal Dawn, watching the defensive fleet assemble around him. Earth had not been idle during the years of war. Orbital defense platforms ringed the planet. Weapons satellites covered every approach. The home fleet numbered 3,000 ships, the largest human force ever gathered. But Hyunwoo knew the numbers. The council fleet outnumbered them more than 3-1. They had better technology, more experienced crews, and nothing left to lose. This would be the final battle. "All stations report ready," his aide announced. "The civilian evacuation is 70% complete." "Good," Hyunwoo said. "But the evacuation is a precaution, not a plan. We will hold Earth. We will not retreat." The council fleet entered the solar system 3 days later. Sensors lit up across the human defensive network, tracking 10,000 points of light moving toward the home of humanity. Hyunwoo had prepared something special for them. As the enemy fleet crossed the orbit of Neptune, every screen, every communication channel, every frequency in the galaxy suddenly carried the same broadcast. It was a message from humanity to the council forces, to the watching galaxy, to history itself. The broadcast began with images. Humanity's wars played across the screens. Ancient battles fought with swords and spears. Modern conflicts with tanks and aircraft. The nuclear devastation they had survived. It showed ice ages that froze continents, plagues that killed billions, disasters that should have ended the species. And through all of it, humans survived. Humans rebuilt. Humans pushed forward. The images ended, and Admiral Hyunwoo's face appeared. "You are entering human space," he said, his voice calm and steady. "We know why you are here. You believe that destroying Earth will end this war. You believe that killing our homeworld will break our spirit." He paused, letting his words sink in. "You are wrong. We have fought ourselves for 10,000 years. We have survived ice ages, plagues, and nuclear fire. We crawled from the mud of our world and reached for the stars with nothing but determination and will. You think your armada frightens us?" His eyes hardened. "We welcome it. This is what we were born for. Come then. Come to Earth. We will show you what fear truly means." Across the council fleet, sensors detected something unprecedented. Stress hormones spiked in crew members of every species. Heart rates elevated. Breathing quickened. The psychological warfare was working. The Krik soldiers, normally fearless drones of the hive mind, hesitated in their positions. The Valorian warriors, who had never known defeat before meeting humanity, whispered to each other about the legends of human resilience. Even the logical synth units calculated probabilities and found the outcomes unsettling. Admiral Cora watched the broadcast with a cold expression. She understood what Hyunwoo was doing, and she had to admit it was effective. "Ignore the propaganda," she ordered. "We have overwhelming force. Mathematics does not lie." But mathematics had never faced humanity before. The Battle of Seoul lasted 3 weeks. Every day brought new horrors for the Council forces. Human ships that should have retreated instead charged into suicide runs. Damaged vessels used their last moments to ram enemy flagships. Ground forces on the outer moons fought to the last soldier, turning every rock into a fortress. Dr. Boyang was a civilian scientist, not a soldier. She had spent her career studying stars and planets, not weapons and tactics. But when the Council fleet broke through the outer defenses and began its final approach to Earth, she made a decision. A research vessel was loaded with antimatter samples for power generation experiments. It was enough antimatter to level a city or destroy a battlecruiser. She piloted her ship directly toward the Council flagship. Warning signals screamed around her. Her hands trembled on the controls. She had never been brave. She had never thought of herself as a hero, but she was human. For Earth, she transmitted on all frequencies as the enemy ship filled her viewport. For humanity, forever. The explosion vaporized both vessels instantly. The flagship's destruction threw the Council formation into chaos. In that moment of confusion, the human fleet launched a devastating counterattack. The battle turned. Day after day, the Council forces fell back. Their ships were destroyed faster than they could regroup. Their soldiers refused to board human vessels after reports of what happened during boarding actions. Their commanders made mistakes born from fear rather than logic. After 3 weeks, it was over. Of the 10,000 ships that had entered human space, fewer than 200 escaped. Admiral Cora was captured when her replacement flagship was disabled by a nuclear strike. She was brought before Admiral Hyunwoo in the battered but victorious Eternal Dawn. "You fought well," Hyunwoo said. He meant it as a compliment. Cora looked at him with eyes that held no anger, only exhaustion and a strange kind of wonder. "How?" she asked. "How did you do this?" "We had every advantage. We had superior numbers, superior technology, superior experience. We should have won. The mathematics said we should have won." Hyunwoo considered her question for a long moment. "You made a mistake," he finally said. "You calculated our strength in ships and soldiers and weapons. You measured us by the standards of every other species you have conquered. But humanity does not fight like other species." He stepped closer, his voice soft but intense. "We fight because fighting is what we are. We fight when we are outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. We fight when logic says we should surrender. We fight when there is no hope left because we do not know how to do anything else." He turned to look out the viewport at the stars beyond. "You asked what we are. I will tell you. We are the species that looked at a hostile universe and decided to win. And nothing you do will ever change that." Cora had no response. For the first time in her long career, she truly understood defeat. The news of the Council's destruction spread through the galaxy like wildfire. 17 species had thrown their combined might at one small blue world, and that world had prevailed. Everything was about to change. The war ended not with a treaty, but with a realization that the Galactic Council convened for what everyone knew would be their final session as rulers of the galaxy. The great hall that had seen 12,000 years of debates and decisions was nearly empty. Many species have refused to send representatives, too ashamed to show their faces after the disaster at Earth. Councilor Tharn stood before the assembly. His scales had turned a deep gray, the color of grief and acceptance among his people. He was old now, ancient even, but his mind remained sharp. "I warned you," he said simply. 50 years ago, when we first discovered humanity, I told you to leave them alone. I told you they were different. I told you they would not submit like the others." No one argued with him. There was nothing left to argue about. "We have spent the last 23 years throwing everything we have at one species," Tharn continued. We have lost more ships, more soldiers, more resources than in the previous 10,000 years of our history combined. And what have we accomplished? Nothing. Less than nothing. We have only made them stronger. He pulled up a holographic display showing human expansion over the past 2 decades. What had once been a single solar system now covered dozens of stars. Their technology had advanced at a rate that terrified every scientist in the council. Their population was growing faster than any projection had predicted. In another 50 years, they will match our combined military strength, Tharn said. In 100 years, they will surpass it. In 200 years, they will rule this galaxy, whether we like it or not. A Valorian admiral stood abruptly. Then we should strike now, while we still have the advantage. We have no advantage, Tharn replied coldly. We never did. We only had numbers, and numbers mean nothing against a species that simply refuses to die. Every fleet we send makes them angrier. Every soldier we kill creates 10 more who want revenge. We cannot win this war. We never could. The chamber fell silent. We have one option remaining, Tharn said. Not victory. Not even peace as equals. We must surrender. We must hope that humanity shows us more mercy than we showed them. And we must pray that their anger has limits. The Treaty of Earth was signed on a clear spring morning in the city once called Seoul. The location was chosen deliberately. Seoul had been nearly destroyed during the war, bombed by Council forces attempting to break human morale. Instead, the attack had only strengthened human resolve. Now the city was rebuilt. More beautiful than before, a testament to humanity's ability to rise from any destruction. Ambassador Mireille represented humanity at the signing. She was 50 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and scars on her hands from the war. Her entire family had been killed when the Kricks attacked her colony world. She had spent years fighting, years hating, years dreaming of revenge. The Council had chosen her specifically because of her loss. They needed to show that humans could forgive even the deepest wounds. The terms of the treaty were simple but absolute. Human space was inviolable. No Council ship would enter without explicit permission. Humanity would join the galactic community as equals, not subjects. All prisoners would be returned. All occupied territories would be evacuated, and there would be reparations. Massive reparations paid over centuries, a constant reminder of what the Council had done and what it had cost them. Councillor Tharn signed on behalf of the Council. His hand trembled as he pressed his mark to the document. "We are sorry," he said quietly to Ambassador Mireille. "We did not understand what you were. We thought you were like the other species we had conquered. We were wrong." Mireille studied him for a long moment. Part of her wanted to reject his apology, to throw his words back in his face and demand more punishment for everything the Council had done. But she was tired. They were all tired. "Learn from this," she finally said. "Learn that not every species will bow to you. Learn that some people will fight until the end, no matter the cost. And remember what that cost you." Tharn nodded slowly. "We will never forget." The true consequence of the war became apparent. In the decades that followed, no species entered human space uninvited, ever. Ships approaching the border would receive a single automated warning. A simple message stating that they were entering human territory and needed permission to proceed. Without exception, they turned back. Even pirates and smugglers avoided human sectors. The stories had spread too far and too deep. Humans fought like demons. Humans never surrendered. Humans held grudges that lasted generations. A century after the war, Ambassador Jisoo was serving at the Galactic Assembly, the new governing body that had replaced the old council. Humanity now held significant influence in galactic affairs, their voice respected and sometimes feared. A young Valorian diplomat approached her at a reception. He was barely old enough to remember the war, part of a generation raised on stories of human ferocity. "Ambassador," he said nervously, "may I ask you a question?" Jisoo smiled warmly. "Of course. I have studied human history extensively. I have read about your wars, your plagues, your disasters. I have tried to understand how you became what you are." He hesitated. "But one thing confuses me. Why do your ships always take the direct route to the galaxy, even when it passes near our territories? Are you not afraid of us?" Jisoo laughed softly. "Afraid? No, young one. We are not afraid. But we have large fleets. We have powerful weapons. We could threaten you." "You could try," Jisoo agreed. "Your ancestors did try. Do you remember what happened?" The young diplomat nodded, his face pale. Every child in the galaxy learned about the Battle of Seoul, about the 23-year war, about the millions who had died trying to conquer humanity. "We take the direct route because we have nothing to fear," Jisoo said. "The galaxy learned a lesson from that war. You learned what happens when you threaten humanity. You learned that we do not bow, we do not break, and we do not forget." She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Your people take the long route around our space, adding weeks to your journeys, because you understand now. You finally learned what fear means. And you learned it from us." 500 years after the war, a young Nexari student asked her history teacher a question during class. "Teacher, why did our ancestors fear the humans so much? I have met humans. They seem so normal. They laugh, they cry, they make mistakes. They are not monsters." The teacher was old, impossibly old. Her scales faded to a pale gray. She had been alive during the war, had seen the destruction firsthand. "You are right," she said slowly. "They are not monsters. That is what made them so terrifying." The student looked confused. "I do not understand. Monsters can be defeated. Monsters have weaknesses that can be exploited. But humans are not monsters. They are simply a species that refuses to accept defeat. No matter the odds, no matter the cost, they keep fighting until they win or until every last one of them is dead." The teacher paused, her voice dropping to nearly a whisper. "And we learned far too late that no force in the universe could make every last human dead. So we stopped trying, and we pray every day that they never truly remember what we did to them. Because if they decide to seek real revenge—" She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. The galaxy had changed forever. Not because humanity had conquered it, but because humanity had proven something that altered the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. Some species were not meant to be ruled. Some species looked at a Celestia universe designed to destroy them and decided to fight back. Some species did not understand the meaning of surrender. Humanity was all of these things and more. They were the reminder that the galaxy was not as safe or predictable as ancient empires liked to believe. They were proof that evolution sometimes created something that could not be stopped, and as long as the stars burned in the sky, the galaxy would remember the lesson humanity had taught them. Fear was not about size or numbers or technology. Fear was about will. And nobody had more will than humanity.